So my guest today on the podcast is a podcast host in his own right. Stanley Karr hosts Wrestling with Heart, which is a video and audio podcast on all platforms. And I'd like to welcome him to my podcast today. So welcome, Stanley. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So Stanley, your podcast isn't just about wrestling, right? It's got another mission statement to it. And so, can you talk about that approach or message and how that concept materialized for you?
Yeah, so I started Wrestling with Heart a couple of years ago, kind of sort of as like a class project. I worked for a college in the Middle Tennessee area where I'm from, and I just took a podcasting class just to get some experience. I was fairly new to it, and I've always been a wrestling fan growing up since I was 5. Went to my first WrestleMania that year that I started the podcast in Dallas. It was when Stone Cold wrestled Kevin Owens. And also attended SummerSlam, which was in Nashville, where I'm from. So I someone that has a radio background, has been doing a lot of music related content. I said, this would be a good idea, a good time to think about doing a wrestling podcast. But if I do a wrestling podcast, I'm going to have to do something that's really never been done. As you know, there's a lot of wrestling podcasts out there, um, various genres and topics to discuss, whether it's reviewing the weekly shows or interviewing or whatever. I wanted to do a podcast interviewing wrestlers and personalities, but not only just talk about their careers. They're human beings too. They're people too, and they have lives that just are inspiring. And they pass their wisdom and their generosity on to other people. They give back to their communities. They do charity work and volunteer and are really making a difference. A lot of the people that I've interviewed are big names, and I've also interviewed some people from the indies and other personnel in the business, people like Al Snow, people like Blue Meanie, Stevie Ray, Devon Dudley, Teddy Long, Candice Michelle, Victoria, just some of the names that I've interviewed, Terry Runnels. It's been growing now 2.5 years. I'm in this for the long haul, and I really want this to be a big hit.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you did mention Al Snow, and he was your first guest as far as the podcast goes. And so what was it like having somebody like Al Snow be the person who kicked off your podcast journey?
Al Snow is just such an amazing guy, very, very passionate about the business, and you can tell when I spoke with him, he was very, very passionate about what he does, and takes his craft very seriously. As you know from watching the Tough Enough show, and now with OVW running that company, you can see he cares about his students and teaching and passing on that knowledge. He also rescued a young boy who was lost at sea. That's just very brave thing to do, and we talked about that and how special that was. So yeah, I think I couldn't kick the podcast off with anyone better.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to your message too, right? Like not anybody in a podcast or the wrestling podcast sphere is going to ask the question about that event in his life, right? And so you get to take that really personal element of these um, athletes and entertainers and kind of talk about that. Where I'm sure they're pretty appreciative of kind of getting to have a platform to speak about that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's the human element. We know these men and women, are tough athletes, but you don't really hear a lot about the human side and what these people do to really make a difference in their communities, and that's what I wanted to highlight with Wrestling with Heart.
Yeah. Yeah. So were there any other folks that were instrumental in getting you started on the podcast journey?
I mean,
So sorry, good.
it was just all myself, you know. I mean, I had help from some people at the college just with getting advice and my teachers and mentors there. But I really wanted to um, kind of educate myself, you know, as well about podcasting and researching. But yeah, my definitely my teachers in my class helped me out for sure. I credit them for uh, giving me the knowledge and tools and encouragement um, to to be able to do that. So I researched how to do a podcast. You know, I've read a lot about how to make, you know, a podcast sound good, just like yours sounds really good with the
Well,
microphones.
thank
And I
you.
got I yeah, you're welcome. So um, just purchasing the right equipment. You know, right now I've got my microphone and headsets that I use, and you know, eventually over time, you know, I might continue to get some new equipment and play around with it. But yeah, you know, it's all about doing your homework and researching and trying to figure out what works, what's the best sound and editing software. Um, so it's just about experimenting.
Yeah. And I like it's a very important word that you said there, like the researching part of it, right? I feel like a lot of the spun up wrestling podcasts are, fans who just want to kind of speak their opinion out and not really doing the groundwork to build an honest podcast that's doing the right research, has some kind of background in this, and whether that's the audio side or the journalism side of it, and they're just kind of throwing this thing out there, and some are good, some are not good, but um, I've been listening to your podcast for quite a while now, and I really appreciate what you're all doing with your podcast.
Thank you.
um, so was there something that you took out of the early episodes that you said, I got to change this, I'm gonna, maybe this strategy's not working, or is there something that you had as like, I'm going to do this in my podcast in those episodes that you consistently have done throughout all, I think it's 150 plus episodes now.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
considerable amount.
yeah. I it's all about consistency, trying to I guess like trying to combine audio and video. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is figuring out how to sync up, um, making sure that your audio and video is both streamlined, so that, because a lot of podcasts now are both audio and video, as you know,
Yeah.
and so just learning how to use that technology. And like I said, it's about, you know, experimenting, seeing what works visually, and just listening and trying to come up with something that, you know, a lot of people are doing, and finding what works. And you know, that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is like, you know, also social media as well. It's important to establish that presence. We're on Facebook and Instagram and Threads, and we just launched a Blue Sky recently. We're on YouTube as well. So getting that social media presence is important. Getting involved in different like wrestling podcast groups, that's
Right.
also important. So I'm also thinking about posting episodes on like Reddits and things like that, to try to promote it as best as possible, because the more you promote yourself, I think that's the best way to get your name out there. I've been going to a lot of wrestling conventions. I'm going to a couple podcasting conventions this year in the beginning of the year, so I'm looking forward to those. So it's all about networking and trying to, you know, meet people that helps kind of steer you in that direction. So it's all about networking.
Yeah, absolutely. And you did mention the conventions. So you've been at WrestleCade a couple years. I think you were also at WrestleCon in Philadelphia this year.
Yeah.
Each time I came to your table. I think you were kind of maybe wandering around, so we didn't get to meet in person, but I did see your table there, and I think that's great. I guess my question is, so what are your goals that you put in front of you for a WrestleCade or a WrestleCon? I'm going to hand out X number of business cards, or I'm going to talk to X number of people. I'm going to try and generate new folks for interviews for the podcast. How does your list of goals line up ahead of these events?
Well, I try to go in mind like, okay, I want to get enough material so people can walk by my table, check out what we're doing. I have a newsletter. If anybody's interested, people want to sign up for it. Um, you could message me, DM me, um, and I can tell you where you can get the newsletter. We put one out every month. I've had sample newsletters at my tables as well as brochures and magnets and pens. Um, try to whenever I see, I do go to different booths to see if who's there, like any of the big stars, and I just try to introduce myself and whoever I can get on the show. I try to see if we can arrange something, and just go from there. But like, it's all about meeting people and trying, and of course, meeting with other podcasters and fans. It's always important because it helps us grow and helps both of us out. We do each other's podcasts, and so um, it's all about networking, like I said, and trying to go out, get out there and um, make that happen, because you just never know. It's all about networking. It's all about showing up. And there's a lot of people I'd love to have on the show. There's a lot of people that I'd love to make sure we get on the show at some point. There's a lot I'd like to do with Wrestling with Heart. It's not just about having a podcast. Like I said, I have a radio background, so I want this show to be syndicated on radio, terrestrial radio. I'm on two stations right now. I'm on one in the Metro Atlanta area, in Dallas, Georgia, WDJY 99.1 FM. And I'm also on Denver Open Media in Denver, Colorado. That's 92.9 FM. But I'd like to get on more stations, trying to, possibly get a book written with all my interviews. So trying to figure out ways to grow the brand as best as possible.
That's great. Those are some great goals there. Um,
Thank you.
so I guess in all of the interviews you've done, so what guest or guests, if any, have you been the most nervous to possibly talk to? Like you're gearing up for the interview, and you're like, oh, maybe a little choked up or something. Has that happened to you, or?
Um, Maybe a couple times. Usually, if when I talk to the guests, when they come across friendly and especially like have a lot of energy, my nerves go away. I mean, my guests that I've had on, I've enjoyed speaking to all of them. So I guess it just depends on, like, am I prepared? Um, do I have all my questions written out? Um, am I able to make that contact and connection with them? The eye contact. It's all about the eye contact.
Yep.
So uh, as it's the right mood, the right setting. I don't think I've ever really had a problem per se with being nervous. But I also want to make sure I do a good job when I'm interviewing somebody, because you just never know.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Um, And then, so I guess another question. You rattled off some names. You've, like I said, 150 episodes, so 150 folks plus that you've spoken to in this journey. What are some of your favorite guests that you've had, and some moments in that list of wrestling personalities that you've spoken to that you still think about to this day, I suppose?
Devon Dudley. I enjoyed speaking with him. Victoria, she was fun to talk to. She's great. Teddy Long, uh, probably my favorite general manager of all time. What else have I had on? Stevie Ray, Harlem Heat.
Yeah.
Trying to think of who else off the top of my head. Al Snow, we mentioned him earlier. I enjoyed talking with him. Um, there's so many people.
Yeah. As I was preparing for this, I was looking at that list, and it's quite the list. I mean, Jake Roberts, Henry Godwin, Ricky Morton, Muhammad Hassan, Baby Doll, all of those folks. I mean, that's an incredible list, and you've got more coming in the near future too. It looks like. Um, so you had mentioned you started watching wrestling young. I did the same thing. Um, when did your fandom start off, and do you remember how it kicked off? What you got interested in?
Yeah, so I guess I credit my father for turning me on to wrestling. I was maybe 4 or 5 years old one night, and my dad was sitting down watching Monday Night Raw. This was like at the height of the Attitude Era, so about like 2000. So The Rock was on, and he was like, back then he was like wearing like the Hawaiian shirts with the glasses, just this big jacked up dude. And I just was like, "What are you watching?" And he goes, "I'm watching wrestling." And I just, The Rock, as we know, has got this, he's very charismatic, larger than life personality. And from there, I just was hooked right away. I did take a break for a little bit though, like after the invasion happened. I still don't know why, but I came back to it, and I'm very fortunate to have really grown up in the ruthless aggression era, because I think that era kind of goes. It's kind of underrated, I feel like, just because I feel like
Sure.
what came before. I love the Attitude Era, though. I do. It's still legendary and iconic. But as I've gotten older and I've watched the Ruthless Aggression Era, there's just as much good stuff about it as the Attitude Era. And I
Yeah.
think there's something for everyone. The storylines, the wrestling, the characters. Um, I really like that time period, that 2002 to like 2008 time period. It's just so good.
Yeah, I mean the wrestling quality in that era, I feel was much better than the Attitude Era, as far as like in ring content. But like I think it's just compared so closely with Attitude Era. It's like we had Attitude Era, now we've got Ruthless Aggression, and that feels lesser than, right? But I totally agree. When you think about what what occurred during those years, um, definitely some great wrestling that happened. Some great characters as well. I mean, Kurt Angle's mostly prime years of in-ring content. You got Brock Lesnar in there. It's incredible era for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess a question for you then: how do you feel now? John Cena's last year, right?
Yeah,
Ruthless Aggression kind of now comes to an end here.
I know. Well, not totally, because we still got Randy Orton. But
I consistently love Randy Orton. For some reason, I don't think of him as Ruthless Aggression, but probably because he's been here for so long. But you're absolutely right. Yes,
but
until Randy's gone.
yeah. Um, but I think that it's kind of scary at the same time. But it's sad and scary because you realize how much time has passed. But John Cena's had a very good career, really great career. I do think he'll go down as one of the all-time greats because of how he was able to not only put together good matches, but as a professional, what he's been able to do outside of the ring. And I think that somebody like John Cena is definitely going to be missed. Um, but I think the company's got some good talents in the modern era that are going to thrive and prosper as well.
I agreed. So, is there a specific talent or storyline or something that's got you interested today that you're keeping tabs on, or
You
what do
know,
you follow as a fan right now?
I think that I think the bloodline stuff has been really good. I'm curious to see what Roman's going to do next, because I think that now that Roman's a babyface, you can kind of put him in that direction of him going for a title, and now he's a good guy. I think that you can definitely um, try to see where that goes. Now that he's no longer with a faction, um, around him, I think it'd be interesting to see what Roman can do on his own. Um, I really like what the women are doing. I think that women's wrestling has definitely turned up a notch in the last few years. I'm a fan of Tiffany Stratton. I think she's immensely talented. I really like what Chelsea Green is doing with that U.S. title. I think she's definitely killing it in her role. I'm curious what's going to happen with Charlotte Flair when she comes back. Becky Lynch, um, Bianca, and Naomi. I'd like to see what's going to end up there with Jade Cargill. AEW, you've got Mercedes doing a good job holding it down. So yeah, I think that I'm a fan of what the women are doing right now, in uh, both companies, all companies, and I like Cody Rhodes, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen with him and Kevin Owens. So yeah, I think wrestling's in good hands right now. And the cool thing about this is, and I've said this on my podcast as well as others, I think that there's no better time to be a wrestling fan right now. We are in a boom period where there's so many different companies. It's accessible now with the internet and social media. You could watch wrestling at your fingertips, whereas before you may have had just one or two companies. Maybe if you're lucky, you could get stuff on the smaller channels, but you've got wrestling everywhere now. So I think we're in good hands, and I hope it stays that way.
Yeah. It's a constant cycle, right? It feels like there's wrestling every single day of the week, and I'm pretty sure there is. As far as shows are concerned, between TNA, WWE, and AEW, aside from Ring of Honor and all of the other groups, and then it feels like there's a special event almost every other weekend. Um, but like you're saying, I mean, I'm going to the Royal Rumble in a couple weeks here, and I feel like both the men and the women's Royal Rumble are unpredictable, right? I think you have 4 or 5 potential winners on each side, to make it very interesting to see how it goes,
And
and
that's a good
I'm
thing.
looking forward to it.
That is a
Yeah,
good thing.
absolutely.
It's that unpredictability. You just never know who could win. And I would like to see. I'm just curious because you haven't really seen it in the last, I guess maybe couple of years. But I think it would be kind of cool for there to be some surprise entries. There's always that surprise factor. You just never know who could show up, and I think that if they were able to, I don't know if they did that last year. I can't remember, but I'd love for
I feel
them
like
to
there were a
do.
couple, but not extensive, if any. Yeah,
Yeah, I'd love if they did like some surprises, just like um, because there's legends that could still go on
yeah.
both the men's and women's divisions. I'd love for them to do bring back a few of those just to get the crowd popping.
Yeah. So one I had been looking forward to was like Victoria. But I mean, she was just on TV the other night, I guess Friday night, for SmackDown. So I wonder if that kind of let the air out of the balloon for that one, or if that was maybe a teaser. But folks like Rob Van Dam,
Mhm.
that the pop on that entrance alone, would be enormous. And my biggest gripe, I love the Royal Rumble. Royal Rumble is my favorite match type of anything, any promotion. Um, and so I always wanted to be good, but I always hated the Royal Rumbles where it's like the Bushwhackers are both in it, and because it's like you're diluting the potential winners, right? You're kind of narrowing it down. This year, I think there's so many quality folks that could potentially win. That something like that happening, where we have a lot of um, one-off appearances,
Mhm.
isn't going to dilute the Royal Rumble. You know what I mean?
No, it's just that element though. I think it's always good to have like that unpredictability, anything can happen sort of feel. Um, which is one of the reasons why I fell in love with wrestling in the first place was that that energy, that anything can happen type of atmosphere, unpredictability. So I think it'd be kind of cool if we saw some people that we wouldn't expect back in the company just for one night. You know.
You've spoken to a lot of folks, and we could rattle off the list of the folks again. But you most recently did a podcast with Barry Horowitz, who's one of my all-time favorite enhancement talents. I won't call him a jobber. Um, I loved his little run as the winner, Barry Horowitz, when he finally got to win a couple against Skip and all of those folks. Um, but what's it like, and what's it meant to you to be a fan and spend 20, 30, 40 minutes with these personalities and get to know them a little bit more on a personal level? How do you feel about that?
Uh, again, I'm a professional. I've been in radio now for 10 years, and uh, having that, makes me feel more comfortable to put more of the professional lens on as opposed to just being a fan. But it's good for me because I have that experience to actually do that. Whereas, you know, I may meet someone at a meet and greet. Sure, that's also just as good. But to be able to talk to them, it's a different feeling. And so being able to get to do that, it's just there's something about that you just can't get anywhere else. And so I really love being able to have those conversations is not only is a good experience, but it just it allows me to get to know the person a bit more and be like, wow, you take things away from it that you wouldn't expect, and that's the cool thing about interviewing is that everybody's interviews are different. And I'm sure if you've interviewed talent before, you can take something away from your interviews, and maybe someone else takes something away from their interviews that they couldn't get anywhere else. So it's all about what what makes it unique, that unique experience. My thing is about giving back to the community. Yours could be on something else. It's all about your personal experiences and what it means to you, as opposed to uh, just getting that quick picture and moving on.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Another question for you here. So aside from your podcast, I saw on your social media, you actually dipped your toe into becoming a ring announcer
Yeah.
for an event at CHW Pro Wrestling.
Yes.
So how did that come about? How'd you feel about that? What was that like?
Yeah. So I had on a guest recently. His name's Aaron Camaro. He's done some work here in the greater Nashville area as far as independent wrestling work. And he had just reached out to me, asked me about, hey, I'm looking for somebody to be a ring announcer. Can you do it? And I just was like, yeah, love to. So we just I was there December 21st. Had a great time, and I'm actually going back there on the 25th. And I'm looking forward to it for the Ashland City Rumble. It's going to be very exciting.
Oh, that's great. All right. Looking forward to it.
And I don't want to say where exactly yet, but I'm look out for commentary in the near future.
Awesome. Really great. A good way to start off 2025, branching out a little bit more, huh?
Yeah.
Very good. Well, Stanley, I appreciate you being here. Can we get from you, how our listeners or viewers can get in touch with your podcast and view your socials?
Sure. So, Wrestling with Heart with Stanley Karr. You can find us on Facebook. Just punch in Wrestling with Heart with Stanley Karr. Find us there. We just reached 1,000 likes. We want to eventually get up to 2K, 2,000 likes. So, hit that like button. Share the page with your friends. It means a lot to me. We're also on YouTube as well. Trying to get up to 700 subscribers. We just had about 694. So please hit that like, subscribe. We're on Instagram at Wrestling with Heart. We're on Threads at Wrestling with Heart, and Blue Sky. I believe it's at wrestlingwithheart.bsky.social. Find us on all those platforms, and we're also on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, listen to your podcasts. We're on all those platforms as well. So please check us out. It's a different take on the wrestling business. We appreciate your support.
Great. And again, thank you so much for being a guest on the 123Wrestle podcast. I've appreciated getting to know you a little bit more through this interview, and thanks for jumping on here with me.
Absolutely. Hope to see you at another convention sometime.
Yeah, and this time we'll actually meet.
That's right. Yes. Yes.
All right.